I caught my husband with my son's fiancée in our own living room hours before the ceremony. My hands didn't shake. Years of holding this family together taught me to breathe, to see, to remember every detail. Instead of a scene, I built a quiet plan, photos, timestamps, and one small remote that would let the facts speak for me when the moment came. What happened next didn't end a wedding so much as it revealed the truth, and that's only where this story begins. Before I continue, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to hear your city and your thoughts. At 5 on the dot, I was wide awake, the kind of wakefulness that comes with a wedding day and a mother's to-do list. The house in Spring Branch was quiet. Even the air conditioner seemed to breathe softer. I sat at my desk where the lamp makes a small lake of light on the wood and the cells of QuickBooks blurred while coffee cooled at my elbow. My small CPA practice has paid for so many ordinary miracles, tuition braces, a patched roof after a storm. Today it would underwrite flowers, a quartet, and a courtyard that promised forever. I printed the vendor schedule and slid it into a plastic sleeve. Habit made me check it twice, then once again, the way you pat a pocket for keys you already feel. I told myself the tightness in my chest was simple work pride. Still, there was a hidden seam of something else, like a loose thread you shouldn't pull. I rinsed my mug and started packing the tote that becomes my second purse every time our family reaches a milestone. Into the canvas bag went my familiar kit red pen, label maker masking tape, spare bulb fuses, a sewing set, safety pins, blister bandages, 2 phone chargers, and a roll of peppermints for nerves that don't want to be named. I added a portable steamer and a Ziploc of floral wire. The list steadied me. When you've kept a family pointed toward a day like this, you learn to carry both tools and grace. By 6, I locked up and headed for the garage while the mockingbirds were still warming up. The freeway was kind to me. Wide lanes, a few delivery trucks, sunrise first, painting the undersides of clouds, and then the tops. The bell tower rose from the neighborhood like a Mediterranean postcard, creamy stucco and iron balconies, a place that sells the feeling of forever by the hour. Security waved me through. I parked, shouldered the tote, and let the cool courtyard rinse the sleep from my eyes. The hedges held last night's mist. I walked the perimeter the way I've walked 100 checklists, fingertips on chair backs, mind on contingencies. At the front rows, I found the reserved signs and laid them out in order: grandparents, parents, wedding party. The seating chart waited on an easel near the arch, a pretty thing with deckled edges and calligraphed names. When I reached mine, my mouth went a little dry. Mother of the groom coordinator. I stood there 1 beat longer than politeness requires, the way you stand when a stranger calls you by the wrong name. Then I took out my red pen. 1 careful stroke, and the parenthetical was gone. I printed a neat post-it mother of the groom and pressed it in place. Without fuss, I photographed the chart and the card and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Proof can be quiet. Work was its own comfort. I straightened a front row chair that had drifted into the aisle. I re-centered a linen runner and rubbed out a faint water ring with the corner of a towel. When 1 string bulb hummed dull, I flagged a tech and asked for a new one, adding please and meaning it. I signed the vendor access sheet in the porte cochere and watched my own hand steady as always. The fountain covered footsteps and whispered like a neighbor you trust. If anyone looked my way, I didn't notice. That kind of invisibility has a way of pretending to be polite. Inside the ballroom, a technician tested the projector. The screen flashed color bars, then a looping deck of slides meant for the reception. 1 slide read, "Thank you to our team," followed by a list of names: planners, florists, lighting. And near the bottom, centered as if to be helpful, Dorothea Lawson vendor support. The room didn't tilt, but something small inside me did. 2 early relatives from the bride's side glanced at the screen, and then at me, the way people do when your title explains you away. Please correct that. Before guests arrive, I said even and kind. I took 1 photo and another for redundancy. Pretty stories are persuasive. Documents are patient. Back in the courtyard, the planner's assistant hurried over with an apology ready. "We've had to compress the credits," she said. "Titles get crowded on smaller displays." I smiled, the kind of smile you use at the DMV when the clerk is doing her best. "I understand. Still restore my proper title." I handed her a box of favors I had ribboned last night and did not follow her into the prep room. Staff can carry boxes. I've carried enough. My phone pinged. An email flagged ceremony script updated. I saved it for later, the way you set aside a letter to read with a clear mind. The string lights passed inspection. Every bulb glowed. I checked battery packs, counted water bottles, and made a note to replace 2 pens. The sun climbed over the palms, and warmth settled across the flagstones. My shoulders lowered. Readiness is a kind of prayer, so is restraint. A bridesmaid hurried by, cheeks pink bobby pins clamped between her lips. "Do you know where the garment rack is?" she muffled. "Staff office past the fountain left at the arch." I said friendly but not enlisted. She thanked me and flew on. I capped the red pen and slid it beside the labeler. In my pocket rested 2 photographs that didn't raise their voice and didn't need to. Today would require patience and proof. Both were already in hand. I steadied my hands and kept moving down the aisle. Calm. My phone chimed again. Ceremony script updated, and for the first time, I felt something important had been quietly cut. My phone had chimed about the ceremony script, so I took it as my cue to cross the courtyard. The stone arcade held a pocket of cool air. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the wet leaves shaken loose by the fountain. Staff rolled chair stacks with quiet efficiency of people who work behind happiness. I kept to the edge, passing a projector cart and a music stand where a black binder waited like a judge. No need to announce myself. Mothers learn to move like stagehands, always present, rarely seen. "Morning, ma'am," the officiant said, Texas warm. He was flipping tabs and checking ribbons. I asked as politely as I could to see the latest ceremony draft. "Of course," he said, offering the binder. I stepped aside so I would not block anyone's path and found the order of service. Processional, welcome, readings, vows. I scanned for a single heading I had cleared weeks ago with both families' mother's tribute. The page turned. My name did not appear. In the margin, a thin line of ink cut through the section that used to be mine. Next to it, a neat note, cut for time. My mouth cooled the way it does when a dentist sprays air on a tooth. I took a photo of the page, then opened my email and pulled up the previous PDF on my phone. Side by side, before and after truth, sat there without raising its voice. I did not argue. "Please restore it after the vows I said. It's short." He glanced toward the couple and said he would review. Rehearsal began. The musicians tapped stands and marked beginnings. The sound tech lifted one ear cup and lowered it again. The floral arch looked like it had always belonged there. I stood behind a column where shade met sun and counted beats while the wedding party found their marks. Bridesmaids laughed in a way that had more air than sound. Groomsmen practiced straight faces, trying not to scuff the aisle runner. I kept my hands folded and let my breathing lengthen. Arthur and Selene took their first pass down the center aisle. It should have been choreography: right foot, left foot, smile, pause. Arthur's palm settled at the small of her back to guide her around a chair leg. It stayed there. Not a helpful touch and lift, but a rest 2-3 heartbeats past courtesy. Selene leaned into it as if the palm told a private joke. His laugh followed young, almost boyish, the pitch I remember from our early years when everything we touched was an inside story. That sound did not belong at our son's rehearsal, and it did not belong on Arthur's face. They reset and tried again, this time with the officiant coaching them to slow at the steps. The same hand found the same place, and again the seconds stretched thin like taffy pulled on a carnival hook. I counted silently 1, 2, too long. A coordinator gestured toward a side bench and said kindly, "We can seat you in the shade." I stayed where the front row sign with my post-it looked out over the aisle. "I'll remain here," I answered. Warm, decided. She nodded and moved on, reading the boundary for what it was. During a pause, I stepped to the officiant and forwarded the earlier script with highlights and timestamps. "For your files," I said, and kept my tone even. He thanked me, promised to read it between cues, and tucked his phone into the breast pocket of his jacket. I did not explain what the moment meant to a mother who has spent 25 years stitching a life together. Explanation is a currency best spent once. Marcus brushed my elbow on his way to check boutonnieres. "You okay, Mom?" he asked quietly. Brows drawn in that boyish way he never quite outgrew, I let my hand rest over his for a second. "I'm fine," I said. "We'll talk at home." He read something in my face and nodded, then went back to his friends, the black shine of his shoes catching the light as he moved. The officiant called for one more entrance. I took my place by the column again and watched the way sunlight found dust in the air like glitter. Arthur and Selene started. When they reached the aisle's narrowest point, the back of hand contact returned soft, owning the kind of touch that says, "This is ours." It was nothing you could file a complaint about and everything you needed to know. I put my phone away. Proof first, words later. "Let's break for lunch," the planner called cheerful and brisk. People spilled toward the shade with the relief of children released from church. Someone handed out tiny bottles of water. I took one I did not want and carried it anyway. The officiant closed the binder and thanked me for the email. "We'll make sure it's right," he offered. I nodded. I have learned that will can mean many things, most of them not yours. Selene passed close enough that her perfume white flowers and something warmer brushed by. "Everything okay?" she asked the planner, not me. Arthur stood half a step behind her, and when she laughed at something on her phone, he looked at her, the way a man looks at a cliff he plans to jump from. The laugh he gave in return was small and private, and it landed in the pit of my stomach like a dropped key. I gathered my tote. I checked the front row again and the script binder one more time. If the tribute returned, I would know. If it did not, I would know that too. Mothers learn to read. Absence like print. I walked through the arcade, letting my heels click loud enough to remind myself I was still there. As the rehearsal broke up, my doorbell camera sent me a motion alert from yesterday at noon. The rehearsal was dissolving into chatter when my phone buzzed again. The alert wasn't new yesterday, 12:02 p.m., but the thumbnail froze me in the arcade's shade. My front door swung wide and two silhouettes slipped inside like they owned the hinges. I saved the clip before I pressed play. Proof lives longer when you respect it. On a stone bench, I opened the video. Friday noon, my entryway. Arthur stepped in first, his hand finding the small of Selene's back as naturally as a light switch. The audio caught keys landing in the blue pottery dish I bought at a church market 20 years ago. That soft clatter was more intimate than any whisper. I paused, took a still, then captured the timestamp and exported the file to a locked folder, named for a case, not a family. Before the clip ended, a second banner slid down. Motion detected, front door. Today's date. The new thumbnail showed the same doorway, the same two shapes, different clothes. Selene glanced over her shoulder. Arthur reached for the deadbolt like a man who knows where you keep the spare batteries. I didn't text. I crossed the courtyard and headed for my car with the calm of someone carrying a full glass. Traffic on I-10 slowed. I muted the phone and drove. 2 houses from home, I parked beneath the big live oak and cut the engine. My spare key turned like a habit that lives in your hand. Inside the hallway was half-dim curtains drawn for afternoon sun. Voices floated from the living room, low-pleased, threaded with the ease people practice. A bright band of light fell across the floorboards I refinished during one long August when Marcus was at camp and money was thin. I took 1 step, then 2. Years ago, I added rubber tips to my heels so I could move quietly when the house needed rest. They were there on the sofa I paid for with April tax season overtime, leaning into a kiss that wasn't a mistake or a goodbye. It was the kind that has a beginning and a plan. Arthur's laugh came out young. Selena's reply was a murmur I'd heard her use on donors and caterers. The bowl of hydrangeas I'd cut before sunrise glowed on the coffee table 3 feet from a betrayal, trying to be tender. I inhaled once steady and lifted my phone. My hand did not shake. I captured stills, Faces, rings, the clock on the mantel. A finish nail ticked on the stairs. Marcus stood on the landing, half in shadow, his jaw locked, his eyes older than 32. We didn't speak. He shook his head once slow. Not yet. We'd spent years teaching each other to use words. Now restraint said everything. He backed away until I couldn't see him. I slipped the phone into my pocket and retraced each step, heel to toe, until the front door and daylight were in front of me again. By the hedges, Marcus met me, breath-measured shoulders squared like game day. "We need clean evidence," he said. "No quaver, no bravado, just a line we could walk, no yelling." "Then we'll have it," I answered. In the shade, I forwarded both clips to a cloud folder that mirrors itself in 3 places. I toggled on a share link tied to my attorney's intake email and set a rule to save future motion alerts automatically. I wrote a single sentence in the notes: "Friday noon, Saturday noon, same entry, same people." Through the front window, the sofa looked smaller, like a stage that had outgrown its actors. The room dressed for guests felt like a set after the cameras quit lights. Still warm, meaning gone. Marcus watched my face the way he used to watch the scoreboard when the game wasn't over. "This is our house," he said. "We're not the ones hiding." "No," I said, "we're not." I let my eyes travel over what I had chosen: curtains, lamp picture frames, and then I turned from the glass. We didn't need more pictures. We needed a plan. In the car, I renamed files by date, time, and location, and added tags a search could love later. I set an off-site backup on a timer and confirmed the battery pack was full. I texted a single line to myself, a habit from years of tracking expenses. Proof first, words later. I drove back toward the bell tower as if I had stepped out for coffee. At a long red light, doubt tried to bargain. Maybe a misunderstanding, maybe a thank you gone too far, maybe nerves. Then the dish of keys sound replayed in my head. Pure and domestic, a sound that only comes when someone relaxes. I let the light turn green before I moved. A mother can forgive many things. She cannot forgive willful blindness to what is in front of her. The venue's arches welcomed me with their same borrowed grandeur. I parked where I had that morning, smoothed my dress, and checked that the remote in my clutch hadn't shifted. The courtyard buzzed vendors, returning relatives, lining up questions, the fountain throwing silver into the sun. I walked through the arcade, shoulders level, heartbeat ordinary. I wore my working face. No one needed my story. Near catering, a young server asked if I knew where the extra votives were. I pointed to the right crate and kept moving. Work is what I do when the room tilts. On the way to the ballroom, I slid the small remote deeper into my clutch and typed one name into my phone: Isolde. I did not add punctuation. I did not explain. I sent it. She called within 5 minutes. "If we're doing this, we do it clean," she said, voice all procedure, no pity. I stepped under the balcony where the noise thinned and answered, "We're doing this. Do it clean." Isolde's words rode the fountain's hiss as I stepped back into the courtyard. I slid the remote deeper into my clutch, checked the spare battery by touch, and nodded to myself. Chain of custody, timestamps, backups. No speeches, only facts that could walk without me. We built the bones. On my phone, I opened a parent folder mirrored to the cloud: Orwa na video 2, audio 3, finance 4, contracts. Isolde dictated like a triage nurse, name by date and second. Duplicate to offsite. Hash verify. I CC'd my attorney so the servers became witnesses. Proof first, words later. In the AV room, Isolde arrived with a borrowed vendor badge. Family Memories read our decoy title card when the projector warmed. We paired the small remote in my clutch to the laptop. One tap advanced, one tap returned. I practiced twice. My iPad buzzed. The utilities inbox still forwards to me. That's where confirmations land. Subject: your sweet confirmation. Inside sat an e-voucher from Celine's email purchased with reward points addressed to Arthur Lawson. Check-in yesterday at 1:17 p.m. His supposed client call. I exported the PDF to Aero 3 Finance and wrote the serial twice, once on paper, once in metadata. Another message slid in a planner group thread tied to the deposit I'd funded. My address must still haunt their CC list. Keep her busy, no open mic, someone typed. Thumbs up rolled in, not cruelty choreography. I screenshotted the thread and headers and filed it under 04 contracts, ceremony logistics. When people want you invisible, they rehearse it. We turned plan into steps. Slide 1 timeline, slide 2 voucher, slide 3 entryway still. Isolde said, audio bed at 6 seconds. Your single line 12 words, then stop. I recited it softly. For accuracy, please correct the record. 12 words, no heat. My mother would have approved. We added fail-safes. Duplicate remote taped under the lectern. Paper packet sealed for counsel if the projector malfunctions. A courier on call to move the drive if anything smells like smoke. If the projector is pulled, Isolde asked. Freeze the last still, I said, and trigger the venue clause about misrepresentation. We checked. The clause was there 3 lines long, small as a thorn. Downstairs, the orchestra rehearsed. I walked the balcony alone, practicing a 3-count inhale, 3-count exhale, until the knock in my ribs found a steadier rhythm. The remote's weight was smaller than the choice it held. I looked at the rose-draped arch and thought of how many seasons I'd pruned on schedule. Control is a rhythm, not a volume. Isolde joined me with coffee I didn't ask for. Tonight we pull the financials, she said. Retirement accounts first, then joint banking. The portal's login history will tell us who changed what and when. If they touched beneficiaries, there's a trail. I nodded. Love made the stage. Money paid the lights. Both tell the truth when you ask correctly. I set a midnight alert and added the banker's direct line I keep for tax season. The small thunk of the phone felt final. I tucked the remote, checked the time, and smoothed the escort card linens with my palm. A server thanked me, assuming I was staff. Guests arrive at 4, he said. I know I answered. In a quiet corner, I reopened the planner thread and let the words sit on glass. I had been managed all year, steered to errands, routed to vendors, handed small duties that kept me useful and away from microphones. They wrote a play. I was cast as background. The slideshow flickered, then blanked. I tapped once to confirm muscle memory. Somewhere in the building, Selene laughed. Somewhere else, Arthur's voice rose in that charming register. People hire. I didn't chase the sounds. I tightened my grip, then released it. The afternoon kept to a schedule I understood because I had paid most of its bills. Isolde checked the folders and nodded. Chain of custody is clean, she said. At midnight, we open the retirement portal, then request the bank's voice auth playback. If he imitated you, they'll have it. My stomach didn't drop. It settled. Truth has a useful weight. I stood at the balcony rail and watched cars thread the lot. I thought of the kitchen clock at home, the one in the background of yesterday's video, and of the keys in the blue dish. Domestic sounds are the softest witnesses. They remember without malice. We ended where any good plan ends with endings. If he storms out, security shows him the policy. If someone unplugs the projector, the battery carries us through the last slide. If denial is the first tactic the voucher's serial sits on, slide 2 large enough for the back row. If voices rise, mine will not. The person who keeps records doesn't have to shout. Breathe, Isolde murmured, though she could see I already was. There's time. I checked my watch and nodded. There's time, I repeated, and felt the truth of those words like a first rung. At 12:47 p.m., my phone reminded me to drink water. I did. I texted Marcus a heart and nothing else. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. We were working the same problem. The orchestra went silent. The room exhaled. In the hush, every light seemed to decide what kind of evening it wanted to shine upon. I slid the remote into its pocket and closed my clutch. At midnight, I would open the retirement portal and watch the login history tell a story I'd never been given. The house was silent except for the faint hum of my desktop, its glow reflecting off the old family photos lining my office wall. I brewed a cup of coffee. I knew I wouldn't finish habit more than comfort, then sat down at my desk at exactly 12:01 a.m. My son's wedding was only hours away, yet here I was, fingers poised over a keyboard, not a dress zipper or corsage in sight. Screen record everything Isolda's voice reminded me through the speakerphone. She had the calm tone of someone who had seen betrayal written in many forms of data. I clicked record system clock visible in the corner, mouse clicks sharp in the audio log. No dramatics, just a digital trail even a lawyer couldn't poke holes in. The audit trail opened like a book I never gave permission to be written. My retirement portal showed logins from our home IP address. At times, I could prove I wasn't there. I'd been at the venue paying deposits and checking seating charts while someone used my account to try and reroute decades of my labor. A change request beneficiary transfer loan-out attempt buried under recent activity. I exported the CSV logs and PDFs, hashing them, uploading copies into 2 clouds and a locked USB. A ledger of treachery, not imagination. I spoke each file name aloud, narrating for the recording. Audit trail 4.06, backup #231. My voice flat but steady. But Isolda's brief interruption came like a metronome. Keep the cursor visible. I obeyed. My years of balancing Marcus's tuition against Arthur's unfinished promises had taught me discipline in columns and totals. Tonight, that same discipline built the fence that would hold him accountable. At 12:25 a.m., I opened our bank's secure portal. A notation sat there, like a bruised recent voice auth transaction inquiry. I requested a compliance callback, citing my right under identity verification laws. Isolda texted a script precise, boring, undeniable. When the officer finally joined the line, he played a training clip. The voice wasn't mine. Arthur's cadence wrapped itself around my security questions, pausing just slightly before saying, my maiden name, the same hesitation he'd always had when telling new neighbors at block parties. I didn't speak. I just requested a case number the notation entered formally. Customer disputes, voice auth identity. Investigation opened. The words sat in my notes like bricks. Heavy, cold, unyielding. A courier's headlights swept my blinds around 12:50 a.m. The envelope in his hand carried the stiff authority of rejection. Inside, beneficiary change rejected. The administrator's watermark was pressed deep into the paper alongside a forged version of my signature that looked like a child's attempt at tracing. The mismatch analysis had caught it. I photographed watermarks, barcodes, even staple positions, then filed it into the folder marked Wainimi Finance. The betrayal was no longer whispers, no longer gestures in the shadows. It was quantifiable attempted loans, sub-$1,000 withdrawals, quiet ledgers built behind my back. I narrated into the mic. This wasn't carelessness. This was intent. Then I built a 1-page summary, 5 bullets, no adjectives for the AV deck that would tell the truth better than my voice ever could. A soft knock broke the rhythm. Marcus stood in the doorway, sweatshirt hood shadowing his tired face. How bad, he asked. Bad enough to be simple? I answered, sliding him the summary. He read it silently, his jaw tightening, but his voice steady. Tomorrow is facts, he said. No speeches. I nodded. Tomorrow wasn't about shouting, crying, or begging for someone to see me. Tomorrow was about evidence. I sealed duplicates of the packet, one for legal counsel, one for the venue manager. The remote sat next to my keyboard, small but heavy with what it meant. I powered down, labeled the USB, and set my alarm for 6:30 a.m. By 12:07 a.m., I had everything locked. By dawn, the next breadcrumb would arrive. At 6:31 a.m., the ping came. My iPad lit up on the counter as the coffee maker sputtered its last drip. The subject line froze me, Cartier, your receipt. I opened it with the calm of someone bracing for impact. Half the charge was cash. The other half had drained from a linked joint account, the same account I kept alive through decades of tax seasons and long nights at my desk. The receipt number matched one of the withdrawals I flagged in last night's audit. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I forwarded the email to my attorney, the subject line typed in my steady hand, Potential Community Property Misuse 06:31 a.m. Celine had been careless with her planning. Months back, she'd sent vendors group emails from her insurer's portal, and the public claim link still lived in my inbox. I clicked through like any guest might, except this time I wasn't looking for floral deposits or catering riders. Her scheduled personal articles policy listed a necklace, its serial number, bold as brass. I captured the page with URL and timestamp, then hashed the PDF for record. 2 windows open side by side. Cartier's receipt, digits neat across the page. Celine's policy schedule, the serial lined up digit for digit. I traced the overlap in red on a 1-pager date amount serial beneficiary. My attorney would call it corroboration. To me, it was betrayal spelled in numbers no one could dispute. Isolde appeared on my video call, her face half in morning light. That serial, she said, is your smoking gun money path plus possession path. The cash portion had its own rhythm. Just under $1,000 at a time drawn from ATMs I paid the fees on. Each withdrawal a piece in Arthur's private puzzle, designed to avoid flags but never avoiding the truth. The rest flowed from our retirement-linked checking account, our liability, our future. I built a flow chart arrows from 401k loan-out attempts into the joint account ending at Cartier's point of sale. No adjectives, just arrows and amounts. At 9 sharp, I walked into the boutique receipt copy folded in my purse. The manager, silver-haired and brisk, confirmed the sale in their system. He printed a letter store watermark generic language purchase verified. That was enough. Proof doesn't need a face. It needs a signature. I thanked him and turned to leave, but he paused. A petite brunette, he said, recalling. Tried it on while a man joked about promotion parties. He showed me a cropped still from a floor camera, the necklace clasp, gleaming the serial card visible on the counter's edge. Not a face, but a frame strong enough to anchor truth. I filed it under Eero 3 Finance Eero 6 Cartier with chain of custody notes. By 9:20, I was back at my desk dialing the insurer. I quoted the policy number, asked about claim procedures. The agent confirmed that any change would trigger an automatic notice to the listed policyholder. I logged the case reference and consented to the recording. Another brick for the wall. The slides came together clean. Slide 1, bank outflow digits, masked date bold. Slide 2, Cartier receipt serial highlighted. Slide 3, boutique verification letter with watermark. Slide 4, insurance schedule, same serial circled. Slide 5, title line only. Community funds, private gift, insured by recipient. I caught my reflection in the microwave door as the kettle hissed. My face was calm, the lines around my eyes sharper, but not broken. This wasn't jealousy. It wasn't heartbreak. It was theft and erasure dressed up in Cartier red. I slipped the remote into my clutch. It felt smaller now that the slides were built and clean. We have the trail I told Marcus over the phone. My voice didn't waver. Money to necklace to policy. Then we don't need volume, he said. We need timing. I set a calendar block ceremony, speak only once. The house was still as I exported the last file. A text from Isolde buzzed in just then. 3 words that pulled me forward into the next battle. Found the shell. Found the shell. That was all Isolde texted, and within minutes we were on a video call. She shared her screen, a Texas LLC formed 6 months ago. The name almost laughable, Celine's maiden name, with a slight twist, as if she thought adding an extra vowel could erase the trail. The registered agent, a strip mall mail, dropped the kind that rents out P.O. boxes with fake suite numbers. The invoices told the rest strategy consulting billed directly to Arthur's employer. The dollar amounts fell into the same crooked rhythm I'd already mapped, half cash, half account, all stolen from the life I built. We dug into the invoices, every line a fingerprint. Celine always double-spaced after periods, always dropped an M dash where a comma would have been cleaner. Those quirks showed up again here, in documents supposedly written by a consultant. 3 invoices neatly bracketing hotel stays I already had proof of. Each one marked net 30, each one paid promptly by Arthur's department. I exported them as PDFs, keeping metadata intact, and tucked them into Eero 4 contracts 07 shell. My chain of custody note was short and sharp. Invoice set Celine Hand Arthur client. Isolde clicked open a public onboarding packet from Arthur's company, scrolling straight to the code of conduct. There it was, plain as daylight: employees must disclose romantic relationships with vendors or face termination. She highlighted the line for me. I copied it into a new slide, no adjectives, just the rule. The contrast was too clean. What they'd built together wasn't only betrayal, it was policy violation in black and white. Next came the breadcrumb in the HR portal. Marcus had once saved a link during his onboarding years, and it still opened a public-facing FAQ. From there, we clicked into the anonymous case intake form. I created a new intake case title, redacted documents, attached chain of custody references. Within a minute, the portal issued a case number. I read it aloud into the screen, recording my voice steady. To confirm, I picked up the phone. HR's compliance line answered on the third ring. I gave them the case number, asked only for a notation of receipt. Potential conflict of interest vendor relationship involving Arthur Lawson. Documentation received, the rep read back. I logged the name, the time, the call length. Proof doesn't shout, it whispers in timestamps. The story needed structure. On my laptop, I built a flowchart, arrows from retirement loan attempts into joint account withdrawals, into Cartier's red bag, into Celine's insurance policy, ending with shell invoices sent straight to Arthur's company. I titled it Financial Path Plum Professional Path. Conflict. Thin lines, thick truth. With Isolde still on the call, we drafted the ethics complaint. Addressed to corporate compliance, sealed copy to the county's economic crimes unit. Exhibits labeled A through H, login trail bank, voice auth case, rejected beneficiary change, Cartier receipt, insurance schedule, boutique verification shell invoices, code of conduct clause. I signed with the same hand I once used to sign permission slips and tax checks. This time, it was a different kind of protection. By noon, I was at FedEx office. The clerk notarized my affidavit, stamped the packets with time and date. One envelope set aside for overnight courier, the other dropped into my attorney's lockbox. I scanned the shipping barcodes into 05 court tracking, proof packaged and moving just like it should. Back home, I added 3 new slides to the AV deck shell invoices, names blurred, company policy clause, HR case confirmation. The remote cycled through them cleanly, 5 seconds per slide, no room for speeches or sentiment. A second fail-safe waited, ushers prepared to hand sealed exhibit packets row by row if the projector failed. I would speak once, only once. I set everything in a shallow tray by the door clutch, USB notarized affidavit. My phone buzzed. An auto email from HR landed in my inbox case, opened, investigator assigned. I closed my eyes and breathed slow to 3. The time for words was coming, but not yet. At 1:02 p.m., another buzz. The venue texted that early guests were taking their seats, and the projector tech had just received a last-minute change request from the planner. The text from HR was still open on my phone when I stepped back into the ballroom. Air conditioning rolled over the tile like a steady tide, carrying the chatter of cousins and the clink of glassware. The quartet tuned. I took in the room the way I always do. Aisles, exits, projector cart near the sound booth, seating cards lined in neat rows. My name was there on a cream card with an easy script, but not where it belonged. 2 rows back, aisle left. The front row place where the mother of the groom card should have been read something vaguer. A catch-all reserved family. I didn't sigh. I did what any accountant does. I photographed both cards, the tiny clock in the frame, proofing the minute, the second. A coordinator breezed past with a practiced smile that didn't quite land. An usher led 2 of Arthur's golfing friends to the front row center, as if my row were a clubhouse bench. A planner leaned in close, whispering about camera clearance eyes, sliding away from mine before they reached the word mother. I walked to the venue manager with the calm I save for audits. Our contract specifies named seating for parents, I said, and showed her the clause number on the signed PDF. She moved a single chair forward, simple as that, and nodded to an usher. I sat, not triumphant, not small, just correctly placed. The quartet shifted to something light. The string lights overhead hummed. A rhythm returned to my breath. I smoothed my skirt and rested my clutch in my lap thumb, tracing the tiny ridge of the remote inside. A flicker rippled across the screen behind the arch. Then it went black. The AV cart's power strip hung like a loose limb. The young tech shrugged toward the planner. We were told the slideshow is cut. I didn't look at the planner. I looked at paper. Addendum C. I said to the manager holding up the work order and the delivery receipt with the morning's timestamp. Client-supplied media delivered pre-event, permitted without additional charge. Dates, signatures, no adjectives. The planner stepped in. We don't have time. I kept my voice level. You have a contract. The manager read the clause out loud so the tech could hear it over the tuning of the strings. Restore what's contracted, she said, and the tech plugged the strip back in. The screen brightened to the neutral title card, Family Memories. I let myself exhale through my nose. In my clutch, the pairing light winked once. Marcus slid in behind me and touched my shoulder, a light anchor. Front row where you belong, he murmured. Keep your hands steady, I told him. We let the paper talk. He nodded, jaw tight but quiet. We faced forward together. We didn't need to make a scene. People expect that from women our age when we are pushed. Pushing back can sound like filing. From the second row, someone offered a verdict to no one in particular, she insisted. I didn't turn. Insistence wears a different coat when it's written into a contract you've already paid for. The ushers closed the side doors. Latecomers pooled near the lobby. I counted the tiny seconds on the projector idle screen, 3 dots in the corner, pulsing like a heartbeat. The manager returned from the booth and gave me a small nod that said, we were good. The AV tech cycled the input once, and as if nothing had ever been unplugged, the white test slide held. A bridesmaid drifted past and, mistaking poise for permission, asked if I could pin her corsage. The staff can help you, I said with warmth that had edges. She flushed, then moved on. Boundaries don't have to draw blood to be real. Across the aisle, the Ellingtons arrived in a careful row, their whispers the color of winter china. I kept my eyes forward. The fountains in the courtyard provided a patient hush. I pictured every step that had led here, the login trails, the voice recording. That wasn't mine, the serial numbers that were. Each proof tucked itself into place like silverware in a drawer. The remote in my clutch felt ordinary now. The planner floated near the booth again, phone to ear, then sideways to the manager with a last appeal. The manager didn't move. Paper had spoken. The rest would be timing and light. I centered my feet beneath my chair so my knees wouldn't shake. You learn tricks like that when you spend years being both stagehand and ghost. Someone behind me whispered that I must have bullied the tech. The tech, not much older than Marcus when he left for college, gave me a half smile when he thought no one was looking. It wasn't gratitude. It was recognition a job done the way it's supposed to be done. The quartet shifted keys. A hush gathered at the doors and then washed across the room as the ushers signaled all clear. I took one more photograph. The test slide, the aisle, the front chair, my card. No people, no faces, just the map of the moment. Then I slid the phone away and rested both hands on the clutch. Timing, not volume. I reminded myself the way my father used to remind me to let bread rise without opening the oven. I breathed to 3 and let my shoulders settle. The officiant stepped into place and lifted his book. The quartet fell silent. Light climbed the arch of flowers Arthur had insisted on. My pulse slowed to a patient drum I could sit inside. The room held its breath. The screen waited white and ready, polite, as a door you are about to open with your own key. Yes. When the quartet fell silent, the officiant lifted his book and the room settled around him like a lid. Doors clicked shut. I felt the small weight of the remote in my clutch, the way you feel a spare key, cool, ordinary, decisive. Marcus's profile at the altar stayed steady. He didn't look over. He didn't need to. Speak now. The words floated out as gentle as prayer. I stood. This union rests on fraud. Today only the facts speak for themselves. 12 words. That was all. I did not search for Arthur's eyes or Celine's. I pressed the remote once. The screen woke. Family memories dissolved into what we had built, dates, documents, a path any neighbor could follow. Slide 1, our living room in gray daylight. The mantle I dust every Thursday. Their hands where their vows do not go. The timestamp sat in the corner like a witness. Sound left the room. Even the fountain in the courtyard seemed to hesitate. Somewhere in the second row, someone breathed my name to see if I was still here. Slide 2. Bank outflow masked digits. Friday noon. Slide 3. Cartier receipt. Half cash, half joint funds. The arrow between them said more than I ever could. Slide 4. Insurance schedule with a necklace serial that matched number for number the receipt. The boutique watermark sat in the corner, simply there. I kept my voice out of it. Proof carries its own tone. Slide 5 arrived like a quiet door opening on a back office, invoices from a shell company using Celine's maiden name variant, month-end dates, lining up with hotel nights. Next to them, a single paragraph from Arthur's employer's policy disclosed romantic vendor ties or face sanction. In the footer, an HR case number marked received. The room tightened the way meetings do when the agenda stops being theoretical. Slide 6 gave us 15 seconds of sound. A male voice practiced, answered my security questions stumbling over my maiden name with the same little hitch Arthur has used since 1988. The bank compliance notice appeared under the waveform. Someone near the aisle whispered, "That's him." No one shushed them. Slide 7, white screen, black letters. Paternity probability. 99.999%. A cropped school photo in the corner. No name, just eyes that matched other eyes in the room. I did not move. I did not speak. The caption read, "Preliminary lab result. Counsel notified." A chair creaked. A mother's pearls clicked lightly against each other, the only applause it would get. Selena wavered, then sat. Arthur stood palms open like the start of a negotiation. "This is a breakdown," he said to the air. "Fabrications. Misinterpretations." He tried a laugh that used to belong to younger summers. It sounded wrong against the piano and the 1,000 small choices that carried us here. The venue manager lifted a hand. The slide stayed. I raised one envelope just high enough for the ushers to see. Exhibits A through H sat inside. Identical packets. Login trail bank, case rejection letter receipt, policy schedule boutique letter invoices. Policy clause. I nodded. The ushers moved one to each side, distributing sealed packets row by row the way church passes the plate. Paper crossed the aisle while the screen held still. Marcus didn't step forward, and he didn't step back. He watched the crowd watch truth. His jaw looked unfamiliar on his face, older, but his hands stayed at his sides. I thought of years of packed lunches and bills on that counter, and how work for family should earn a front row seat without explanation. Arthur angled his body toward the side aisle. He measured the distance the way a man sizes up a risky lane change. The AV cart and 2 chairs made a narrow corridor. Security shifted, not aggressive, just present. He glanced at Celine. She stared at the floor where the aisle runner curled. The officiant closed his book without a sound. He did not declare or scold. He waited, holding a place none of us expected. I kept my hands low on the clutch. The remote was warm now, not from drama, but from skin. This is a family matter. Arthur tried again, softer, for sympathy. The manager's voice answered him from the doorway with the calm of someone who has read a contract twice. It became a venue matter the moment you asked us to unplug equipment that had been contracted and delivered. Rules are not rude. 2 packets reached the second row. I saw a familiar aunt lift her glasses and read the first page, mouth tightening, as she moved through dates that did not need adjectives. Behind her, a cousin held his envelope like it might sting. It wouldn't. Truth is antiseptic before it ever burns. Marcus looked at me then. Not a question, just a check. I gave him a small nod. We would not raise our voices. We would not name call. We would not toss 25 years of our lives into the air for spectacle. We would answer with clarity and let the room draw its own lines. A whisper lifted. What happens now? The officiant could have answered, but he did not. I did not either. Slides don't argue, and neither do signed letters. In the balcony, a camera red light glowed, and I wondered how much of this would be remembered as gossip and how much as warning. The room sorted into columns: those who trust paper, those who trust charm, and those who won't choose. I have lived long enough to wait them too. Arthur took one step toward the aisle. The room finally moved with him. Arthur turned toward the aisle, shoulders tense, as if he could slip past the crowd before the air settled around him. But security was already there. 3 steps ahead, palms raised in a way that left him no room to bargain. The DNA slide still glowed. Behind me, white letters on black, undeniable. I stayed seated. The officiant lowered his book. Murmurs rolled across the ceiling like distant thunder. Arthur reached for the side door, but the latch clicked before his hand touched it. "Sir, remain inside," one of the attendants said, steady but firm. Marcus did not move from his place. We had agreed no chasing, only paper. My nod to the ushers was enough. Exhibit packets fanned outward row by row. Each carried a plain cover page with dates, case numbers, and an exhibit list. My words were absent. The envelopes spoke louder. Guests unfolded them. Glasses lifted, eyes narrowed. Some looked at me, some away. Celine bent toward her mother, whispering quick panic syllables that ended with her eyes fixed on the printed serial number. That's not. The denial broke in her throat. The boutique watermark carried more weight than her voice. The venue manager motioned staff to open the side foyer for air, but no one moved yet. Then the badges arrived. 2 plainclothes detectives, a uniformed officer. They entered quietly, the way experience teaches you to. The manager stepped forward, exchanged brief words, and their eyes tracked past Arthur straight to Celine. "Celine Navarro," one detective said, unfolding a document. "You're under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud." The handcuffs clicked soft, almost gentle, but the sound cut across the room. Her mother's bracelet rattled as she reached instinctively too late. The path cleared. I did not follow. I only logged the time in my mind, one more entry for my affidavit. Arthur tried again to grab the story, lifting his hands toward the officiant. "Dorothea is unwell," he said. "This is hysteria, not evidence." I raised a single page, the bank compliance case number, bold at the top. The officiant read it, then closed his book completely. The room stilled. I stood only long enough to say, "There will be no wedding today." 12 words again. Then I placed a sealed packet in the venue manager's hand for their records. The screen dimmed to white. The hum of the projector sounded like an exhale. Marcus offered his arm. We walked the center aisle without hurry. People moved aside, some lowering their eyes, some holding my gaze with small nods of recognition. Outside, the sunlight was blunt, unforgiving and honest. In the foyer, I texted my attorney, "Deck delivered, arrest executed, we're safe." The remote dropped into my clutch, no heavier than a coin, a finished tool. Arthur took one step toward the aisle and the room had followed. Now it was finished. The patrol car's taillights had barely disappeared when I locked my front door, turned the deadbolt twice, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The house was still. No murmurs from guests, no quartet humming in the background, just silence, honest and plain. I reset the alarm code with new digits, swapped the Wi-Fi password to something only Marcus and I would remember, and checked the latches on each window as if I were sealing a vault. After the day we'd had, I needed to know the walls themselves stood on my side. Marcus brewed mint tea. He didn't say the word wedding, and neither did I. We sat across the kitchen table, hands around warm mugs, letting the steam do the talking. I told him the bravest thing he'd done wasn't standing in front of the altar or watching the screen light up. It was staying still when Arthur tried to run. "You chose paper over chaos," I whispered. His jaw set the way his father's used to when he was trying not to cry. That night we made a pact. No contact with Arthur or Selene. No exceptions. Everything went through lawyers. Marcus handed me his spare house keys, and I tucked them into the drawer where I kept old recipes. We hugged, not dramatic, not long, just enough to say we're still here, just us two. Before bed, I placed the clutch with the USB on the nightstand beside my glasses. The house breathed like it had exhaled. At 8:58 Monday morning, I stood under the fluorescent hum of the HR building's lobby. Hand sanitizer, stale coffee, the glass walls of a conference room. The investigator, a man with silver at his temples, greeted me without small talk. He slid a bottle of water across the table, placed a recorder between us, and nodded. I spoke the way Isolde had trained me. Dates, case numbers, policy language exhibits, no speculation, no adjectives, just facts. When I laid out the invoices under Celine's maiden name variant and the conflict of interest clause from Arthur's employer, the investigator leaned back, pen poised. "This triggers mandatory review," he said. "Suspension is on the table." He asked me to sign a witness statement. His handwriting was neat when he noted logs preserved, legal notified. Before I left, he thanked me for clarity and restraint. I only nodded. In the parking lot, I called Isolde. "Documented and logged," I said. She answered, "Next, civil remedies. Today if you can." The clouds above the garage ramp broke apart like old fabric. I turned my car toward the Galleria. My attorney's office smelled faintly of leather and copier toner. He was already flipping through the binder when I arrived. "We file for divorce today," he said plainly. On the desk, a petition, a restraining order on accounts, a notice to insurers. Each page bore my initials in blue ink. The paralegal stamped my affidavit about the 401k loans and voice-auth fraud. Every exhibit was tabbed, labeled notarized. My anger didn't sign those papers, my pen did. He dictated letters, a preservation notice to Arthur's employer, a spoliation warning to Selena's counsel. Every word was cold and precise, the kind of language courts respect. When we finished, I felt lighter, like I'd set down a heavy bag I'd been carrying for months. I texted Marcus on the way home, groceries on counter, locksmith receipt in drawer, rest. He sent back a photo of the front door new key in his palm. Caption, "We're good, Mom." I saved the image into a folder I'd titled, Safety. That afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop, relatives, a reporter, even a neighbor. I answered none. Instead, I sent one group text, "No statements. Please respect our privacy." Then I set the kettle on and opened the binder to a tab marked Next. The house felt orderly, almost calm. At 4:12 p.m., a new message landed. Subject line, Dorothea. No greeting, no fluff. Dorothea, my daughter Zoe has questions. If you're willing, we are too. Nicole. I stared at the screen until the kettle clicked off. My hands stilled over the keys. The house was so quiet I could hear my own breath. Finally, I typed 3 words, yes, with Marcus. And I hit send before fear could bargain. I hit send before fear could bargain. Yes, with Marcus. Those 3 words left the screen like an exhale I had been holding for weeks. By morning, the house felt different. I changed the alarm code, checked every latch, and brewed a pot of coffee I didn't finish. Marcus asked quietly, "Mom, are you sure?" I only nodded. There are no certainties in a life cracked open, just the choice to keep stepping forward. At noon, the cafe was already full of clatter silverware on plates, the hiss of the espresso machine children tugging at their parents' sleeves. Nicole had chosen a corner table by the window where the light was kind. Zoe sat beside her, restless eyes fixed on the door. Marcus and I walked in together, and I sat down where I could see them both. No small talk. Just glasses of water, napkins folded twice, and the kind of silence that asks to be filled with truth. Zoe spoke first, voice small but steady. "Did you hate me when you saw that slide?" The words trembled in the air. I met her gaze, those eyes part. Arthur part, something fragile and new. "I never hated you," I said evenly. I hated the lies. Nicole's hand closed over her daughter's. She didn't try to defend what couldn't be defended. We let the stillness stand not as judgment, but as space. From there, we set our terms out loud. Not to replace anyone, not to pretend at instant family, just to open a door slowly. 2 Sunday dinners a month, no cameras, no photos posted. If paternity ever became public record, Zoe's school life would remain untouched. Nicole nodded, eyes damp but resolved. Marcus leaned in, smiling gently, and offered to teach Zoe how to make our family gumbo. Not as a ritual, just as something you do on an ordinary night when the kitchen smells like onions and butter. He mentioned the hydrangeas I once planted under our old bay window, stubborn flowers that sulk when moved, but eventually bloom louder than before. I told Zoe that story. She smiled just a flicker, but it was the first real smile of the afternoon, and it landed like sunlight after rain. My phone buzzed once. HR had confirmed Arthur's suspension pending investigation, his access revoked. I kept it simple. They've acted. I didn't read the details at the table. This space wasn't for hearings or warrants, it was for living. Later, another message came through from my attorney. The account freeze was granted, the restraining order signed, restitution scheduled with the boutique. I thanked him and switched the phone off. Today wasn't for paperwork. Back home, the soil was still damp from last night's watering. I pressed 2 hydrangea cuttings into the earth by the fence. Marcus labeled each stake Sunday and light. We watered them, once the hose arcing over like a quiet benediction. That evening, the kitchen hummed. The gumbo pot bubbled slow and steady, Zoe chopping celery while Marcus stirred the roux until it turned the color of penny copper. I added black pepper, the smell rising like memory. We talked about movies, about school projects, about nothing that would end up in a courtroom. Nicole waited in the car outside, respecting the boundary we'd drawn. She texted one line, "Thank you." After dinner, when the house settled, I wrote 2 short notes. One to my clients, the office remains steady. Another to relatives. No statements. Please respect our privacy. I filed the evidence deck and the remote into the safe, not trophies, just tools that had done their work. The house exhaled into its own quiet rhythm, the tick of the thermostat, the sigh of cooling pots. Later on the porch, the cicadas began their evening chorus. Marcus rinsed the ladle in the sink, and Zoe waved from the car window as they pulled away. I realized then that this day hadn't ended with a slammed door, but with 2 doors opening slowly, carefully, but opening all the same. I wasn't forgiving the past to excuse it. I was forgiving it so it wouldn't own one more hour of my life. Tomorrow there would be more affidavits, more forms, more steps. But tonight there was a clean kitchen, 2 cuttings settling into new soil, and a promise kept. Silence was never weakness. Silence was discipline. I turned off the porch light and left the hydrangeas to the moon. I've learned this much: silence is not weakness, it's discipline. When love turns dishonest, keep records, set boundaries, and choose dignity over drama. We rebuilt our home with paper patience and Sunday dinners, not shouting. If my story helps you take this with you, you are allowed to protect your peace and still keep your heart open to new family. Did any part mirror your life? What would you have done at the ceremony if this touched you? Drop a 1 or share where you're watching from. If not, tell me why. And if you want more true family stories told with honesty and hope, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Your voice helps this community grow. Thank you for being here.